All right, gentlemen, let's jump into it here this morning. Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another receivables info webinar. Today, I'm here with two very well-known individuals around the receivable management space. I have Mr. Larry Costa, who is with CMS or Capital Management Services, and Pete Klipa, who's coming to us from Harvest Strategy Group. How you gentlemen doing today?
Doing just great, Anthony.
Awesome. Just to kind of kick this off and to make sure that we kind of set an expectation or help people understand your perspectives, let's start with Larry, but could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Thank you. Yeah. So been with Capital Management 21 years. Essentially started out as the director of marketing, and through the abilities to network into the business, really learn the business, and work with some very prestigious, you know, really outstanding clients. I'll elevate myself to president of Capital Management Services for the past 8 years, and we've been very fortunate. We do business with the top issuers in the country. We've always presented ourselves as a high quality organization, really client centric. I've had the pleasure to work with Pete for a very long period of time when he would Discover, and now we're starting up a new relationship at Harvest. And we're going to spend some time talking about how important that relationship is and that trust. And I just want to thank you again for having me, Adam. I really appreciate this opportunity. And
Absolutely. And I think, Larry, you're the perfect guy to be representing kind of the agency and service provider side of this discussion, because in the time that I've been working with you, client centric, I think, is the best description I've heard of your organization and how you guys approach your business. So I want to thank you for joining us today. Pete, from your side, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what it is that you're doing with Harvest?
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, it's an honor to be with both of you here on this webinar. I'm in my second year as COO at Harvest Strategy Group. And my background leading up to this position with Harvest is really one in various stops and collections and recovery over the last 25 years. I started my collections route in the utility business, actual field collections, which was an interesting introduction, but it helped create, some passion around collections and understanding the importance of that in the financial makeup of companies. I had a stint at Discover Card where I ran both agency for a period of time and also the legal collection end. I had a stop in the auto business where I worked at American Credit Acceptance and ran loss mitigation. And then more recently here, I was at the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. Of course, credit counseling kind of sits between the pre-charge-off world and the post-charge-off world. So a lot of the strategy that I learned there from the largest banks who are committed to credit counseling really have served me well, in the position that I'm now in. So excited to be talking to the group today about vendor partnership. It's an important subject.
Agreed wholeheartedly. And I think your breadth of experience is going to shine in today's discussion. For those of you that are watching today, I just want to mention, please ask questions in the chat. We love responding and answering questions and engaging the audience in the discussion. So I highly suggest, if you have any questions as we're going through, that you add them. Talking about building relationships, and this was kind of funny for me getting on to join the first discussion that we were doing, planning for this webinar, because you guys have worked together for so long. And, the first thing that you guys both said when it came to building relationships was that it takes time. Right. And you have to invest that time in it. And that's why it's the first bullet point, right? Because of that whole conversation, that was like the big thing that I pulled out of it. But let's talk a little bit about what that actually means, and Pete, let me start with you. What does that mean from your perspective about building a relationship? What are you looking for in a relationship with a service provider?
Absolutely. I think one of the key things around this is that trust factor, because, there's so much training. There's so much setup in the investment, with a vendor, and it takes time. It takes time on the part of those that manage the vendor, and it takes time with the vendor and their staff. There's quite a bit of training and grounding and expectations that have to occur, and all of these commitments, occur up front. And the idea is that when it's working right, you make those investments and they pay off over time, and you don't have to do them again, with other vendors, because that is costly. And it also, results in a type of rework that, you have to kind of restart the cycle on the time side. So the idea is to build a long-term relationship where, we're grounded in expectation. It's a two-way communication street. So we have that opportunity to update and learn from each other. And yes, there's always going to be performance and compliance expectations. That's what it's all about. But the idea is to achieve that together in a quality way, and set yourself up for long-term business, because that ends up being the win-win that really both parties are seeking.
Fair. I mean, that's it sounds like some insightful information for those that are looking to build a relationship with a creditor, or, or an asset owner or manager. Larry, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you do to establish relationships, right? And to build a camaraderie beyond just the professional realm?
No, it's just like Pete alluded to. It does take time, and we got to make the same investment as a service provider. We got to do the programming. We got to line up the resources. So it takes time, and you got to. The real key is obviously do business with people that you trust, but is the expectations. Don't go to an issuer and say, send me 50,000 accounts month one. That's not a good strategy. Is to build slowly. Make sure the resources lined up. Make sure you have the right strategy. Try several different strategies and work in a key partnership. That's the investment that you have to make with the issuer. You've got to really, really sit down with them and manage their expectations, and don't overpromise. It's going to be. Look, you got to learn the portfolio. No matter how long you're doing this, every portfolio has different characteristics. So take the time to learn the portfolio, manage expectations to clients, deliver a superior level of service, and constant communication. Communication is the absolute key to maintaining strong relationship with your clients, and just be forthright with them. Clients today are very sophisticated. They know what's going on. They see all your KPIs. They see your promises, how many were capped, how many were broken, how many calls you made. With Reg F, that's limited as well, but how many emails you sent. So it's all there. So trying to be deceptive with your client is insanity. They know what's going on. Sit down with them, explain why things didn't go as expected, and what's your plan to address it. That's really how you build a relationship. You take your time, you do it right, manage expectations, and don't overcommit yourself.
I like that. I mean, not overcommitting yourself, I think, I think you'd rather undercommit and overperform, right? You don't want to find yourself behind the eight ball promising things that you can't do, because that's never a great way to start off a relationship. But you did, both of you kind of talked a little bit about listening and how it's so key to that building of the relationship. But it sounds like it's more of a bilateral listening than it is, I think historically it's been the creditor telling the service providers, these were the things that you will do. But I feel like that dynamic has changed. And now that listening has come in both directions, because some of the service providers have been able to resolve some complex situations. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you have to, because first of all, the calibration sessions bring that all into the fold. The issuer or the creditor, they want to hear what their consumers saying. Sometimes consumers they're always concerned with those agencies, but sometimes they're concerned with the issuer. Like the issuer, they believe that the issuer's promises were not kept. I was supposed to get the things with my car. I was supposed to get this with my car. I was supposed to be, charged this level of interest. I mean, the issuer needs to hear that. They need to know what their consumer is concerned about. So, with the calibration sessions, the other things that are going on, that's why listening is the key, and you do that jointly, and then you work off that. And you got to send your creditor, you got to send them good calls, where you get payments. You got to send them not so good calls, right? Or maybe your agent performed, there's an improvement there, or where the consumer is upset. So that's why I'm saying listening and communication is the key. The issuer or the service management company, they've got to know what's going on, because they can help you. Because don't forget, they're interacting with other agencies too. So this is a common thread. They can share those practices. So hey, Larry, this agency had the same problem. This is how they addressed it, or how are you going to address it, so I can share that with agency B. So that's what I'm saying. That's why it is absolutely a bilateral two-way street.
It definitely feels that way. I mean, Pete, from your perspective, do you look at your service providers as almost like a listening post to better understand the consumer?
Absolutely. I mean, they're an extension of the servicer, the lender themselves, and Harvest kind of sits as an in between, a manager of collection agencies and law firms. So we're a conduit in that relationship. Anything we can do to help facilitate discussion time around the improvement of the process is important. A couple of examples that I've had of this in my career. The first one being at Harvest, going back to last spring. There was an NCBA event near our office in Denver,
Mhm.
and we brought in both vendors and clients to that discussion for some facilitated discussion time, where they could have some exchange around items of mutual interest. And we actually moved different vendors and different clients around a series of rooms that were in our office and adjacent hotel. And it was an opportunity for people to get together and talk face to face. We lost that a little bit during
Mhm.
the COVID timeframe, and we were trying to get regrounded in that a little bit. And I think it worked well. There were definitely some takeaways, as well as some of the relationship building that we're talking about uh, through an event like that. But the logistics of that is not easy, but it's worth it, because some of that face to face time really ends up paying dividends. We have the RMA event coming up in a few weeks, and we've got a
Mhm.
number of meetings set up both in group fashion as well as individual fashion. And we're encouraging our vendors and clients to weigh in on those discussions so that we can, work together, in this in-person forum that happens, somewhat rarely. There will be a lot of takeaways that come out of that process that hopefully will be mutually beneficial for both clients and vendors. We did the same thing with Discover, going back to my time there, where we'd have summits, with our agencies
Mhm.
and our law firms, and really make an investment in that, because it just ends up paying long term in the strategy that you set up.
I think
Yeah, the
RMAI
summit.
has become like a good location for that, right? Where people are starting to have some of these agency meetings and law firm meetings and facilitate some of those discussions in private, right? Because some of that can't just be public knowledge. Um, but both of you kind of talked a little bit about kind of skirted over the issue, but I'm going to kind of address it a little bit more directly, which is the people do business with the people they like. And so from my perspective, it's always been about building a personal relationship. So for years, related to the RMAI summit, for example, if you watch my early episodes of Receivables Roundtable, you'll notice when I was in the Port St. Lucie office, there was a wall of pictures behind me all the time, right? And it was all different pictures of industry folks at little private get-togethers and events or activities that I would do with them, and it became part of the fabric of relationships that I developed around the industry. And that might be meeting some people at the ice bar in Las Vegas, or taking dune buggies off into the desert in Arizona before the summit, or fishing off the coast of Boston before a conference or whatever. But those types of personal interactions and just spending time together, it's not that just you're giving them gifts or whatever, but you're finding that time, you're giving them the gift of your time, and you're creating these these relationships that transcends the professional environment. It's been my experience that when you have those transcendent relationships, you're able to overcome any difficulties that you may cross in the business. Meaning, if you get hit, look, in every relationship, things are going to go wrong at some point. And when we've got that transcendent relationship that allows us to look beyond what is happening right now and make sure that we're maintaining that handshake through the clouds, right? And that we're continuing forward, it really positions us well, because in the end, given two equal options, even not given two equal options, people are generally going to choose to do business with the people they like.
Yeah, it's so true. And, you think about some of the team building things that go on in our industry. I mean, occasionally, we get together to play golf, or, maybe to raise some money through a golf event, something like that.
Mhm.
It's an opportunity to be together with somebody for a 3 or 4 hour stretch, where you kind of have a mutual goal that you're working toward, that being to score well on the
Mhm.
course. But there's trust that's built up as part of that process. You get an opportunity to see somebody in an element kind of outside the work environment. And I think there's a lot to be gained through that. One of the things we've done at NCBA is get a group together to play basketball,
Mhm.
and not everybody's a great player. Some of them are out there just getting a workout in or whatever. But, it's an opportunity to spend some time together in an environment that maybe isn't it like a loud restaurant or a bar where he can't always hear so good, but you're working on a mutual goal and having some fun together. And I just think that those types of things really do build trust and that relationship building that we're seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from an agency perspective, even a marketing perspective, I've been blessed over the years that as my clients go from organization to organization, they take us with us.
Mhm.
And, I've been able to form some really good friendships in these 21 years. People that yeah, sure, we do business together, but we're truly friends. And
Yeah.
we families, we care about each other's situations in life. And
Mhm.
like maybe you go golfing together one day, or maybe just call each other during an athletic event, and you pick your team, I pick my team, or just call each other, say how the family's doing, or share a different event. But I'm really blessed. I mean, I would say half of my relationships, half of my clients, when they left the organization, they brought me with them. And I had one company that the individual been my client 3 times, and
Mhm.
that's it. And
Because
that's
he
what
knows how to solve the problem. That's part of his job, right? If he's in charge of collections and his job is to resolve collections, and he knows that you can do it for him, right? And if he likes working with you, it's just icing on the cake and being able to maintain the relationship over the business partnership.
It's that trust factor Pete started right off talking about that,
Mhm.
you know, and that's built up as, again, I hate to keep coming back to these points, but just being totally clear and obvious and honest with your business partner. That's how
Mhm.
you build that. That's how you build that relationship. Look, you're not going to win every batch. Anybody tells you we're number one in everything, they're lying. You can't. It's too expensive to be number one in everything. But and you shouldn't present yourself that way. You're going to give them an honest effort. You're going to make adjustments along the way, but you're always going to have that person's best interest at heart, and you're always going to communicate that to your client,
Mhm.
and they understand. And that's what
Mhm.
they want. That's what they want in a relationship.
Larry, I remember the first time I met you and I asked you, so what are you good at? Like, what's your agency all about? And you were laser focused in your, it's not, I'm the best at everything. Can't beat me in high balance, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody's got their niche, and those that say that they're the best at everything are just never going to be there.
Well, you can't be the best at everything, and
Doesn't
then
work.
later you got to diversify yourself too. We're going to talk about later in the program. It's really important, in this industry, is that we're all seeing dramatic changes. You've got to sometimes reshape yourself and refocus yourself and add additional skill sets to keep you relevant in the industry and let you expand into other segments of this business. And we'll talk about that later on.
Well, one of the things that we've kind of addressed in terms of the relationship is that working towards a mutual goal. And I think Pete, you had mentioned this too when we were talking about golf, right? That you're on the golf course, you're working towards a mutual goal. So it creates this mutual camaraderie, right? Like nothing brings people together like a common enemy, or a
Mhm.
common task. And so from your perspective, from a targeting improvement, actually, really what I want to ask you is about the turnover question, right? So turnover is costly for all. And as someone who's managing a network of service providers, I mean, that's got to be exponentially more important to you. Can you talk to me a little bit about what does that mean? And Larry, I want you to jump in on this one too, because I think the costs of a bad relationship are all around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, we're in an environment where the competition in labor is still very fierce.
Mm.
We have very low unemployment. We have a lot of folks who are looking to work from home and they don't necessarily want to be coming into the office. And that's kind of the new normal these days, right? So that competition for labor is really significant. And you have to find a way, to retain people and avoid that turnover. So this goes for your employees as well as the employees at your vendors, because that turnover is costly. You think about what you invest in that person around performance expectations and compliance expectations. And to the degree that you have to have any kind of restart on that, it really can be costly for both the vendor as well as the vendor manager. So, we have to be realistic in our goals around that. We have to be having conversations about how that's going, because it's an ongoing challenge. And the challenge kind of manifests itself differently from vendor to vendor. Some vendors, have sort of set up for the future without a lot of in-office activity. Others are still remote, but maybe occasionally come in. And we've seen the same things with our banks and lenders. They're kind of in that wrestling match a little bit with employees as well. I think ultimately we have to land at a place where we are able to minimize the turnover and try to keep employees happy, retained, and possessing of that knowledge that we've put in them without a whole lot of changeover in the ranks.
Mm.
Yeah,
Larry,
couldn't
from
agree
your
with you.
perspective, like what are some of the things that you're doing to early on connect with that new client and avoid any kind of turnover?
Well, again, it's managing the expectations, right?
Yeah.
Is really learning what they're looking for. Again, and it varies whether it's the first or third party project. But let's just stay on the third party project for now. What truly is their liquidation goal? What are their expectations? What is their 6-month expectation? And really, really understanding that, and then designing a program that's going to help you get there, but doing it incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the key. Is it's just just don't say to your client, again, 6 months we'll do on a prime we're going to do 11.6%. You got to understand the portfolio, because you got to make different investments these days. You have to have a digital strategy. You still have to have a diet. You still have to have social media strategy. It's just everything is very costly. That's why you want to maintain your client relationships, because if you go through all this, you invest in people, you invest in the program, you invest in the training, it doesn't work out. You just spent a lot of money, you haven't made anything. When on a third party portfolio, you don't start making money till 4 or 5 months down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 or 4 months, you're not making any money, because you got your programming costs, you get your people costs. You're not recovering that many dollars. You're building your payer base.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Adam,
it's
if
an
I could
earlier
add,
start.
Go ahead, Pete.
Well, if I could add, in a competitive environment, when you think about vendor management and vendors, the vendor managers kind of have insight into other vendors that they're managing, hopefully in a competitive way, with the vendor in question.
Mm-hmm.
And the vendors, they kind of have insight into issuer expectations, servicer expectations that maybe are outside what that vendor manager may have detail on. So it's an interesting dynamic that kind of creates this environment of at least potential best practices without, revealing too much. And that kind of dialogue and exchange can be very helpful in ultimately setting up a continuous improvement environment where we're working toward these mutual goals and we're doing it together, as we learn on a particular portfolio. So I think that's the idea that we'd like to try to get to. It takes, time and investment to get there, but you got to at least set up the forum for a dialogue. One of the things that we did at Discover was we collected a bunch of best practices around compliance. And the thought process was that, compliance is everybody's business. And it's something that we should work together on and try to have good outcomes, for ultimately the benefit of the customer in this case. So, that's one way to approach it, without, maybe revealing too much, because you do have to be guarded, when it comes to certain, client parameters, expectations with things.
Agreed.
Understood. I guess let me ask you the kind of my last question on this topic is about the targeted improvement, right? So it feels like you guys are especially in the onboarding process, like early on, you're setting these incremental targets and goals, right? Getting to that level and then stair stepping. But is there any more to that process?
Well, I kind of look at it from an effort perspective and a results perspective, because we manage effort with the expectation of results, and we manage the certain goals that are financially driven from a results standpoint. And it's a combination of that, when it's working best. I think in a perfect world, there's a real correlation, between effort and outcome results. It's not always, 1 for 1, but we try to target it in that way and challenge the vendors in such a way that, hey, to the degree you can, max out on effort and outcomes will follow. But we're going to be managing ultimately to those outcomes, because it's important that those results, in some way speak for themselves.
Makes a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
agree.
sense. Go ahead, Larry.
You have to You have to do it incrementally anyways, because with the reg Fs, you're really limited in your first 30, 45 days, right? You can send the IDL, right, with the model notice. Then you can't send anything for 45 days in terms of the letter communication. You're only allowed, 7x7. You can start introducing maybe some digital aspects, but you have to take a serious step. But then you're going to look at the portfolio. Again, you're going to listen to calls. You're going to listen to what you have to say. You're going to analyze the characters. You're going to score it, right? You're going to do all these different things. And so your strategy is going to evolve over the first 5, 6 months. And that's why you work with your partner like Pete, and he'll say, yeah, this is what we've seen in the past. This is, the ramp, and this is what the other, he talked about best practice, this is what other providers have done for us. And it kind of gives you a blueprint. But again, it's all incremental.
Yeah, baby steps. I don't want to be all, what was that? Uncle Bob or something, the baby steps. He had so as we talk about service providers, right, and the perspective that the service provider ultimately has in this relationship, Larry, these are some of the things that we were kind of talking about early on in kind of planning this discussion. But you've already talked about the being transparent, but the discovery and understanding before committing, I feel like, is a really strong point. And I know we talked a little bit about how you have to set these setting good expectations, right? But is there anything that you're doing in that kind of pre-contractual stage or even the pre-start stage from a discovery standpoint to give you better visibility into the needs of your client?
Well, you're really just sitting down with your client and talking about those expectations. I mean, we take a really targeted approach. Like you talk about a very laser focus, but we know what we're good at. And we try to seek out clients that have that particular requirement. And then we talk about, we sit down with the client, we really talk about the expectations and, what is their portfolio? Like if it's a balance DDA type portfolio, I'm the wrong guy. But if it's a higher balance credit card or a mortgage or, loan or, some other type of product, we are the right guy because that's really what we're really good at. So we talk about, okay, here's what we've done in the past for other clients with some of their portfolios. You really sit down and get, we talked about this all day today. What we think we can do for you. Here's how we're going to approach it. What do you think? What are your suggestions? It's that whole thing up front is just to really discuss and let your client know the way you're going to approach this. That's we talk about that a lot today. But I talk about focus on market segments. Where we have strong performance. That's what we focus on. That's where we can help our clients.
Now, the consistency piece is another one that you and I have talked about in the past too, about being consistent and it's not about, can I perform this month? It's, can I perform consistently? Can you talk a little bit about how you manage your clients through those cycles?
Yeah, again, it's constant communication. You look, clients share results sometimes even on a daily basis. So first of all, the key is to manage outlier performance, right? Everybody has certain agents on the portfolio. You want to manage your outlier performance. People who are not performing up to the standard, address that with them, address that with your client. But that's how you remain consistent. Look, you're always going to have people that are really, really good at the portfolio, but you got to get everybody respectable at portfolio. And that's how you stay consistent. Because if you're just going to rely on 2 or 3, superstars to get your big payments instead of the programs, you're not going to be able to compete month over. It's managing that outlier performance, getting people up to speed, getting people better, working with your client. They know who your bottom performers are, and putting programs in place, getting their input, doing the calibration sessions, all these things we talked about earlier, to get everybody up to a very effective level. And that's how you remain consistent.
I think maintaining that consistency and, the underlying message being just do the right thing. Right. And as through my time being a broker and all the other jobs that I've done throughout this industry, if you constantly just go back to doing the right thing, I mean, you tend to find a lot of success from a servicing perspective. It's not always the most profitable avenue, but it's the long-term building business avenue.
And be honest with your client, we're in business. I always tell my clients, I'm a for-profit company. I'm not a not-for-profit. You can share that with them. But at this particular fee level, it's difficult for us to, put the resources to make a decent margin. You got to communicate with your client. They understand that.
Well, they're also working the margins, right? So they're looking at it from they're just looking at it from the other side, right? They're looking at it from the creditor's perspective, which I think Pete can kind of talk to us a little bit about how he sees things from his side of the table.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the creditor side of things, they realize full well that, managing a legal network, managing a network of collection agencies, it's a big investment. It's time consuming, it's strategic, and, it's meriting, a lot of attention from their perspective. And that attention could be direct, in the way they have oversight, or they may utilize, an outfit like Harvest to assist with that process. We serve in kind of a consultative role in that sense with our banks and servicers and credit unions. And it just gives us an opportunity to help them with our industry experience as they, set up their strategy around recovery. So there's a lot of different ways to go about this. That we have some clients who are just in the agency business. We have some that do some pre-legal work also on the agency side. And then we have others, that are committed to the legal and the ongoing legal collections perspective. I think where Harvest is at its best is when we're helping these clients through our pro score mechanism to help them with this strategic decisioning. It's an important part of how we do business, and it's something that our clients rely on us very heavily to do. The other thing was something that Larry mentioned around, kind of this daily expectation that the creditors have. In many cases, the creditors do look at it that way. They want to know that there's that daily effort. And then how does that build to the weekly expectation with the update and refreshes on forecast? How does that build to the monthly perspective? How do we do on the month it is? And then ultimately to quarterly and annual type goals. But what Harvest does around those daily expectations that build is really our exceptions process. It gives us insight on both the agency and the attorney level to really understand what the work effort is on our parts of our vendors. And this is a big upfront investment in the setup with our vendors. So they commit to that. It takes months to get through that. But then once they're through it, we're able to get that feedback on a daily basis and share that with them on our insights that we're seeing. There's also a competitive aspect to that where, we can look at what another vendor's doing on the same portfolio and see what the exceptions read is there, and then provide that competitive feedback that really is an effort-based review that goes in conjunction with the results-based assessment. When it comes to this, treating vendors, similar to employees, that kind of gets back to that whole idea of, the long haul, the trust. We've invested in these vendors. We've invested in their compliance, in their performance expectation, and that whole learning and training is ongoing. So we don't want to restart that. So you coach these employees up and try not to cut unnecessarily quick, because that there'll be a restart there that ultimately will be costly. Clarify strategies. From a creditor's perspective, I know when I was at Discover, and we've seen that with our creditor clients at Harvest, they are expecting to understand from us how we are moving the needle strategically. And this very much gets back to the whole idea of what you would do with employees, especially management employees should be contributing on a strategic level. And our creditors expect that from us, and we expect that from our vendors. What are you doing to innovate the business? Some of this goes back to my days in the military. I had a general who came to me, and I was a second lieutenant. I was a young guy, and he said, "Pete, what are you doing to innovate your business?" And I said, I'm not sure, sir. What do you mean by that? And he's like, "You are an officer in the Air Force. You need to be thinking about innovating your business at least an hour each day." And it always stuck with me and struck with me that, boy, I never thought about it that way, but that's really what should be expected from managers and executives, is that executive innovation, that strategic needle being moved. That's what the creditors want. They want to see that, and they want to benefit from that when it comes to ultimately outcomes. So these are things that we can do with our vendors, and ultimately it bubbles up to our individual clients and some of the payoff.
That's some very insightful information. And as you were kind of talking, I noticed that there's a Q&A tool here as well. So let me hit a couple of the questions from our Q&A tool. The first one, Larry, I think this one's for you. It says, how do you ensure you are aligning yourself with the right companies? Do you vet all potential clients first?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I talk to them. I ask them what their expectations are. Um, Again, we're very strategic in who we do business with because, as Pete mentioned earlier, and you've mentioned, everybody's mentioned, it's a very, very tight labor market. So we really only look for clients that have the paper that we're really good at, the scale. We prefer larger clients, and then we can deliver. Yeah, we do. We vet our. We sit down with them, and they sit down with us. We're very particular in who we do business with
I
because
think it's a good way to be.
you can't. Well, you can't do business with everybody. It's just too hard to get the right resources, manage the right resources, manage the client's expectations.
Not everyone has reasonable expectations.
Right.
Right. So you have to pick and choose which groups you want to work with. And I get that younger groups or organizations that are that may be struggling financially or are often more willing to take on a client that they know is not a great fit for them. But once you've built your organization and you've established yourself, you do find yourself in a position where you have a little bit more control over, what it is, who you want to work with, right? And again, people do business with the people that they like, and I think that's the kind of one of the key factors there.
Absolutely. No, it is. But and I understand. Like if you're a young agency just getting started, you may not have the ability to vet. But I'm just telling you, in the long run, it's really important to do business with people like the guys like Pete, who are really strategic business partners. They're going to believe in you, going to work with you, and stay with you, as opposed to signing up 15 clients and hoping you keep 5. That's the recipe for disaster.
Fair, Larry. Very well said. The next question that I have here is for Pete. What are your expectations? Oh, maybe this is for both of you. What are your expectations of your clients? For example, transparency. What do you need from your clients to ensure that you are both getting what is needed from the partnership? I think to me, this is asking, how are you measuring, like on some level, how are you measuring that both sides are getting what they need?
Well, the way we do it is by documenting, what was covered in a performance call, in a site visit. I think about some of the details that go into a discussion like that. It might be a meeting that lasts 45 minutes or an hour, or if it's a site visit, it might last half a day. But to the degree that those types of things are being exchanged, it's really important that there's a record of that because we have lots of vendors, we have lots of clients, and we have to memorialize the takeaways in such a way that everybody kind of understands, okay, this is what we're going to do. And there's a transparent element to it, I guess, that it's important that we kind of put that in front of everybody. Let's be upfront, let's do it in writing, and let's revisit the commitments that were made as part of that process. And that part is time consuming. It's an investment in time to do that, not only in the archive, but also, in the homework and getting ready for the next meeting to revisit some of those commitments. But it's a necessary element. And I think that it has transparency sort of all through it.
And I agree. Typically, it's outlined in the SLAs and the contract what the expectations are. And listen, all of us do the same thing. Like we all use either LiveVox or some cloud-based platform. Our clients want access to their calls. We give them access to their calls. We have weekly conference calls, like Pete mentioned, and we're very straightforward with our clients. These are things we expect from our clients in terms of we want to see the results. We want to see we stack up against our competitors, and we believe in a free flow of information. Clients are very sophisticated today. They want your KPIs. You give them to them. I mean, that's the way you become successful. If you try and hide things from your clients, these guys are too smart, too sophisticated. It's not going to work.
They already know the answer to a lot of the questions before they ask them.
Of course they do.
Right? Like, I mean, with enough data at hand, it's amazing what you can predict.
They see your remittance. They see everybody else's remittance. If they send you 5,000 accounts and you collected on 3 of them, guess what? They see.
They already know that you can't do it. I like that approach. The third question that we had in the Q&A, I don't know if this is something that we answer in the webinar, Pete, but I'm going to ask it to you so that you can direct this person to the right resource. But it says, how does Harvest vet out its agencies? What does a typical onboarding process look like?
Well, onboarding with Harvest is pretty detailed, and it's the type of thing where we have a checklist where we gather information, and it's probably not as onerous as some major credit card issues or whatever, but it's still very detailed in the gathering. There's a lot of policy and procedure that's vetted and reviewed, and then once we get past kind of the contractual stage, there's a move into our EDI process that is foundational to us being able to capture, the comings and goings of remittances and, updates that, produce our exception reporting. So that part of it, we try to spell that out as best we can. In the education, we have, network guides for both our agencies and our attorneys that provide detail around those expectations. It's an extensive set of documents, as you might imagine. And it also includes, the file formatting that's important, for the technology areas of our vendors to get set up for that. So we do our best, to kind of go through that process and shepherd the vendors through that. And then the hope is at the end of that investment that, we begin to build on the relationship in such a way that it begins to look financially viable for them. We'll talk a little bit here in a second about that financial part of it, but that's an important piece of this. Everybody's in it for profit, as Larry said, and the idea is to find win-win relationships that contribute to that.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's no different than any other large company. Getting on board with Pete, it's going to take us 6 to 8 months. But that's the same thing with the major issuer.
Sure.
For you to land a major issuer, for the guy who asks this question, or the person who asks this question, I shouldn't assume it's a guy. The sales cycle in this business is 12 to 16 months. That's the reality of this business. From the time you first meet your prospect to the time you get the contract signed to the time you get implemented, it's 12 to 18 months. That's the reality of this business because of all the regulatory requirements, because of the sophistication in the marketplace. Everybody has to be extraordinarily careful. And that's just the reality of the business. So,
Agreed.
So we just had another question come through here, and I think this is a really good one because it kind of goes back to an extension of something that we talked about at the beginning, which is about innovation, right? And we talked about constant innovation and improvement. Do your companies look at new technology to improve recovery, or do your partners bring you technologies to review?
It's both. It's both. So you have to evolve. Everybody knows this. Okay, you have to evolve your technology. Well, first of all, again, because that's the preferred method, right? People want to communicate electronically. There's still a lot of voice activity. Still, your 80% of your payments either come from a call you launched or somebody calling back in. There's still some self-service out there, but you have to constantly evolve your technology because that's one of the ways you lower your cost. So, and a lot of our issuers bring us technology, saying, "Have you looked at this? Have you tried that?" So we're always open to talking to our issuing clients and our other clients about new technology, and we're always willing to look at it ourselves. We have to constantly evolve our technology. You have to.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, this gets to the continuous improvement and strategy element that we talked about just a minute ago. That certainly carries over to a digital type consideration, and it's our expectation that our agencies and our law firms continue to challenge their current position as it relates to what they're doing with digital. Some of this requires some client sign off, and different creditors are further along on this than others. Also, different creditors are more supportive of it in terms of the data that they can provide to enable digital. But all of those things can be, taken on. The hurdles are not insurmountable. So, the challenge is to continue to kind of push the vendors to keep innovating, so that, we can stay as cutting edge as possible on what this contributes. We recently made some significant changes in digital, with one of our client vendor interactions, and we were really surprised at the effect it had on results. It was almost immediate, and that part, while we expected there would be a needle move, I guess we didn't expect it to be that big, within, 30, 60-day time frame. So that was exciting. And, we want to duplicate that where we can.
Wow. That's, I think that's a great approach. As I've talked with Larry in the past, one of the things we've talked a lot about, and it's actually one of the most popular articles on receivablesinfo.com, is talking about first party versus third party relationships and how those are actually different. So Larry, I know that you kind of live in both worlds, right? And you live in both worlds, but you've got some clearly defined lines between those worlds as well. Can you talk a little bit about the differences in managing your first party versus your third party relationships?
Absolutely. Let's talk about the first part. First party relationships are very dependent on the issuer because you're actually an extension of their department. You're typically on their systems. You're sometimes even on their dialing platform. So you truly are an extension of the department. And a lot of times they're dictating the strategy. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases, that first party relationship, they're basically paying you for a body. Now, the good news for out there is that it's much more quicker to achieve profitability in a first party relationship because you typically get a per seat, right, or per seat. So if you manage your costs properly, those things can become profitable very quickly. But again, you have to manage to the issuer's expectations. So you're extension of the department, you're working on their systems, their statistics, and you're getting direction typically from their management. They're almost managing your employees. There's many more quality. It's much more quality dependent because of their brand. Not that third party isn't quality dependent, but it's highly measured. And part of your compensation is your ability to meet very stringent quality requirements, 95, 96% quality numbers. So now that's not all first party relationships. Some first party relationship, same thing. It's a per seat, but you're designing the strategy, maybe using your dialing platform. You're typically though on the organization's system of record to maintain that. But again, those projects require a different skill set of collector. It's a little more of a customer service approach. They're not as highly compensated. A lot of first party projects have minimal bonus opportunities. So you really got an employee that's really customer service oriented, but also has the ability to make and get payments. And different organizations have different strategies. Some organizations want you to keep the people, make them current as quickly as possible. Some want them to keep you in maybe a bucket 2 or bucket 3 environment. Some want you to prevent charge off at all costs. So you've got to really adapt your strategy to what the creditor or the issuer strategy is. But it is, first party is different because the most important things, besides being effective, is you got to protect their brand. They really want their brand protected. Third party, we're all familiar with third party. Same thing. You still have to have quality, you still have to protect their brand. But in third party, it's your strategy, it's your systems. And so you really get a lot more control. Again, your client's going to want certain performance and certain quality expectations. But again, you really much drive much more of the process.
Okay.
And to be successful in the business today, you have to have both. You've got to have some first party customer service projects, and you got to have some third party projects. As third parties, that tends to, especially with the payer base you can build, that tends to give long-term profitability. First party gives you shorter-term profitability, but first party is also a lot more volatile. Clients change. This month they want 50 people, next month they only want 35, then they want 72 the next month. So you've got to have that flexibility to really move up and down with your client's requirements. Sorry for such a verbose answer.
That was well structured. I definitely appreciate that because it is different in the nuances. It's like a nuanced difference, right? Like there's the level, you kind of covered it, the level of control, and those items, I think it's interesting for me to kind of see that. I don't have as much experience on the first party side, so it's interesting to kind of watch some of the differences and to hear about how those are not always going to be the same. But kind of coming into our kind of final minutes here, I know, Pete, this was a big thing that we've been talking about, right? Like, how do we make money together?
Yeah, absolutely. This whole concept of understanding things financially, from a financial statement standpoint, balance sheet, income statement. This is a really important part of vendor management for a few reasons. You know, all of us exist in this vendor world, with a certain percentage of revenue that is, really from a certain client, right? So understanding sort of where you sit in that revenue picture with this client is really important. And same thing when you manage vendors, what percentage of revenue are you representing, on their income statement, because it gives some idea as to, how big you are with them. So we have done a deep dive around this, and we're understanding it better and better. And what we want to do is grow, with the people that are performing well, and become a bigger part of their business, so that the strategic items that we work on together can be difference making for them and for us. So it really comes down to relationship. The other piece of the vendor management financial look is one of understanding profitability. Are they healthy, profit wise? Are they solvent? Because we're dealing with financial transactions, and to the degree that there is any question around solvency, that would be surfaced, on their income statement and balance sheet. And then the other piece of it is really, are they investing in the business for the future? When you see a lot of distributions that are coming out of the income statement on the annual basis, it may give some indication that they may not be in it, for the long term. Are they committed to reinvesting, some of those profits in the future viability of the business? Because that gives you some indication of what their strategic commitment is. So we look at all these things, and it's important to us. And I know that some of the vendors say, "Oh, geez, you're collecting my financial statements." Well, there's a method, to the madness, and it comes down to greater understanding, trust, transparency, and some review of that picture.
And trust but verify.
That's what it comes down to. Correct.
Right? Like it's great to trust them, but you also are going to have to review some of that documentation. Larry, how do you go about kind of that relationship in terms of making money together?
Again, it's the total transparency. That's why we vet our clients. We really look for clients that have the right product that we think we'd be successful at, successful for them, successful for ourselves. And then you get to, as I said, you start small the portfolio. You take a small slice, and you make sure you're effective at it. And then you continue to add. And that's how you gain your profitability. You just have to take listen, it's just like Pete mentioned. You got to know what your cost structure is. You know what your cost is. What does it cost me to bring on an additional client? What's it cost me to bring on an additional associate, bring on an additional manager? It's all marginal analysis. Once you understand that, and you understand the product that you're getting into, you can navigate the financial waters. You understand that if I take on this project at this volume and I add these many people down the road, this will yield me the following. And that's the way you approach it. And you always have to be upfront with your client. You can't accept a fee that's not going to generate profitability, because when accepting that fee, certain things you have to do. You got to send your letters. You got to send email. You got to make phone calls. You got to get the right people. You got to train them. You got to continually train them. So you got to take all those things into consideration. And that's why I said that's why I vet my clients. I want to make it good for my client. I want to make it good for us. And if we're not making money, we're not going to put the right effort in, and that's going to disappoint my client. So it starts day one.
Yeah, I agree. It is a true, I think we can kind of wrap it with this point, is that it is a true partnership, right? Both sides have to be profitable. It has to make sense for everyone involved to get the attention required to be successful.
Yeah, it's short-sighted otherwise. You have to be considering, that financial picture. And one way to do that is to exchange on this information and to dialogue on it. So it's definitely a part of our vendor management strategy.
And a lot of the issuers and the clients we do is, they have incentive and bonus programs which really help. That if you're able to achieve certain objectives and then go over and above your goal, there's additional compensation. Those are the kinds of things that you work with your client on. So maybe it's not a fee adjustment in the sense that, hey, I need 3% more. Hey, if I achieve that, what kind of bonus dollars? Because that's good for the client, right? If you exceed the goal he gave you, that's additional revenue for the client. He can give it back to you. So there's ways to be creative and do that. And that's really what we strive for. But again, as Pete mentioned, it's got to be totally transparent. You got to open your books to each other and help each other out. And that's why, it goes back to the first thing. Do business with people you trust and you like.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be successful. Again, it's hard when you're starting out. I started out 21 years ago. I was knocking on doors, okay? This guy with a tin cup begging for business, right? We've been fortunate in that we've been able to be much more selective in who we do business with, but it always pays to be selective up front. Do business with people that you truly trust and you can help each other. And that's how you build your organization.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for coming on and having a chat with me today. I feel like I found the two perfect guests for this particular discussion, guys that had already worked together. And I think the approaches that both of you take are on the forefront of where the industry is going, because this conversation is much different than the one we would have had 10 years ago on the exact same subject, because I feel like both of you are kind of riding the wave of how things are evolving in this industry and helping to set the new standard. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights today.
Thanks for having us, Adam. It's always great talking to
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, you guys are great. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask, you can drop those on LinkedIn when we post the replay on Friday. But thank you everybody for watching today. We really appreciate your time and attention. And gentlemen, I'll see you in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Adam. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. See you now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.